Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a Kickstarter preview. This one is for Atlantis Rising from Elf Creek Games. You've probably heard of this game before. It is a 2 to 6 player co-op game that is being re-implemented in a new Kickstarter with a version that has some fantastic art and some definite improvements.
And you might have guessed by the name, you are trying to save Atlantis from being flooded by all these wrathful things happening to it. The board is really unique. This is one of the cooler games that has presence on the table.
Yeah.
It's actually a star, and each of these different peninsulas represent a particular type of resource that you're trying to quickly collect before that part falls into the ocean. You're going to need all these parts in order to build these different mechanisms around the outside of it. This kind of represents the mysticism of Atlantis. All these different pieces of gear that they may or may not have created in the past, trying to power up your power core before the center of the island floods.
Yeah, like we said, this is a co-op, so you're working together, and it is a difficult one. You're going to need all the resources you can possibly get to try to overcome this thing, and there are plenty of resources in the game. As you can see from all the components here, we've got the main board that is comprised of these 6 peninsulas, and as you can see, these are separate pieces. These things are going to quickly be sinking into the ocean over time. And then we've also got these player boards. There's going to be a number of player boards in the game. This basically gives you a lot of the information that you're going to need throughout the game, the turn structure, the things that you can spend mystic energy for, but also, and most importantly, it's going to have the leader powers, which are the new variable player powers in the game.
One thing we should mention also is that this is purely a prototype of the game. You're going to see a lot of pictures on the screen. This is not final art, or you're going to see a lot of pixelization. It's all going to be cleaned up, so make sure you check out their Kickstarter page when it goes live. All right, so let's talk about how to play the game. It's very, very simple. At the very start of the game, everyone is going to place their Atlanteans, and you're going to have an X number of these Atlanteans and leaders, depending upon the number of players. Now, this is really cool, and one of the neat aspects of the game. This is done all simultaneously. All the players are going to talk across the table and say, what resources do we need? What things do we need to hit? Where do we need to place them? Because it's very important on where you place your Atlanteans. Each of these peninsulas, as we said, is its own tile. And the further that you go up on any of these areas, the lesser the rewards. However, when you place them across the bottom, you're more susceptible to the area being flooded and returning all your leaders and your Atlanteans back to your board, so they'll get nothing.
Yeah, because the problem is there's a little stage in between when you place your workers and when you use your workers, and that's when things flood. So you're taking a big risk by going out at the ends there, but you can reap some rewards for sure.
Each of us in a 4-player game is going to start with 1 leader and 2 Atlanteans, and at this point is when we're going to place them on the board. As we said, each of these tiles has their own individual worker placement spots, and simultaneously we can all decide amongst ourselves where we wish to place them. We're going to talk about each of the 6 individual spots, so you better understand what we're trying to do in the process of raising Atlantis.
Yeah, I'll start with the forest and the hills and the mountains. These are these 3 locations around this side of the board. This is where you're going to be going to get crystals, gold, and ore. These are going to be used throughout the game in order to build some of the components for the gate. That's what we're all trying to do. They don't want to use a boat to get away from an Atlantis. They're building a teleporting gate. So we're going to be using these resources and maybe even converting some of them in order to fulfill these. All of these spots, like we said earlier, are going to be places you can go with workers. Then you're going to roll a die, and you basically have to just achieve the die value that's depicted on the tile or higher in order to have success and gain that. Some of these are going to have multiple spots. 1 player can go there with 2 of his workers. 2 players can share that spot. Everyone's going to get to roll and try to get some success.
Now, as you go further up to the peninsula, you have to roll higher value dice in them. So there's the rub. You want to try to roll lower dice because the odds are in your favor. However, it's also very likely that those could turn over and flood. One of the other things is anytime you roll in the game, you can use one of your mystic energies to increase that die value by 1 for each mystic energy that you spend. Everyone's going to start with 1 of those mystic energy, and there's ways to get that, including going simply to the center spot to be able to grab as many as you wish according to how many places you place in there. I'm going to talk about the next 3 because they all do something a little bit different. The first one is the forges, and that's right here. That allows you to convert your ore over to these silver bars. These are called Atlantium in the game. This is very important because these 2 are needed to do all of these different gates that you need to power up and create. The next one here is the library, and this is incredibly, incredibly important. This allows you to get library cards, and in this library stack, you have 2 different kind of cards. There's ones you can expend at any time to be able to do something very special, like be able to grab ore, be able to prevent a misfortune from happening. There's a variety of those in the game, and it's limited. Once that deck is gone, it is gone. You can't reshuffle that deck and use it again, so you have to protect that deck. Also in that is artifacts. These are new to the game, and they're going to be placed face up in front of you. These are reoccurring variable player powers that you're going to be able to use anytime that the card says that you can use them. The trick here is that the bottom portion is much better than the top portion because at the bottom, you can draw 2 and simply keep them. The other ones, as you go up, you're going to have to be discarding those out of the game permanently. So you want to go to those lower locations, but again, they're susceptible to flooding. The final location is the cities. This is where you're going to be able to get more Atlanteans by putting your workers here. This is the only spot in the game where you have to have an X number of workers at each of these spots, and that's 2. You can't simply place 1 worker. You're going to type multiple workers to be able to go to this spot. And you're going to be able to roll 2 dice and hit variable numbers as you go up. This is going to collect Atlanteans for you to use throughout the game. This is the only way to be able to collect more of your own colored Atlanteans to be able to use forever.
Yeah, this brings up an interesting point because this, of all the peninsulas, is the only one that requires to have 2 people. You're working as a team after all, so you have to do that. There are going to actually be some of the gate pieces that also have spots like that. And we didn't mention this already, but as you build the gate pieces, there are some that have some of these worker locations on them like this. Once this is built as part of the gate, this is now another place that anyone can go. In fact, there is one of the leaders, in fact, the artificer, is actually able to take their leader, that's their power, and go to these before they're built, which is a really, really cool power.
So we've talked about the 6 different peninsulas as well as the gates. Well, how do you build the gates? There is a power core here that allows you to place your workers here as well to be able to expend the resources that you have to choose any one of these gates and build it permanently. When you do so, you're simply going to take that gate and put it around it, meaning that that's been built, and that most of these are going to give you a one-time instant benefit, but some of them are spots at that point where everybody can go to, so you can start getting that benefit throughout the course of the game.
And there is a limit to that. The power core, multiple people can go there, and in fact, they can actually cooperate towards building one of those components, or they can each build one themselves if they want to.
All right, so you don't take your actions yet. Once you place your people, then the misfortunes happen. Starting with the starting player, each player around the table is going to draw 1 misfortune card. These cards are awful. The cards are going to represent a variety of different things. I'll talk about the 6 basic ones. They could simply tell you to go to any one of these areas, such as the forges, and you have to flip over the furthest down peninsula tile. So I would look at forges, and I would take the furthest one down, and then you make it flooded. Each player is going to do this. So there's 6 like this, but there's also a variety of other cards in the game that you can have turn up.
Yeah, a couple of that aren't so bad. I'll start with the kind of bad one, is the controlled flood. This one you're going to have to flood 2 tiles, but the group gets to decide together which ones you're going to flood. So depending on the stage of the game, you can actually take some control of it. The other one is the most beautiful thing you can see during this game, and that is calm seas. Nothing happens. When you flip this card, no flooding happens. You've lived to fight another day.
There's also special misfortunes. There's one very specific special misfortune called Spur the Cycle. If this one comes up, it's going to take all those misfortune cards and you have to reshuffle them to create a new deck. However, there's really, really bad ones as well. This one here makes you discard 9 cards off the top of your library, which is going to burn about 1/3 of that deck out. And then there's ones that can destroy these blueprints that you see here. Say you've spent a whole turn or multiple turns to complete this, guess what? It's going to come off that power core and you have to complete it again. So there's a lot of those really, really awful misfortune cards in here.
Yeah, so between all of these different misfortune cards, there's a lot of things that are going to happen, particularly some of that flooding. And like we mentioned earlier, but we'll touch on it again, if we flood tiles and our Atlanteans are on those tiles, in most cases, those Atlanteans are going to come right back to you. You're not going to be able to take that action. That's that sort of risk-reward thing going on. So if you place out to the end of the peninsula and it floods, or even the second to last tile and that peninsula floods twice, you're going to get those guys back. Of course, there are some leader powers that can let you avoid that, but for the most part, you've got to try to avoid it.
One thing that you can do is you can place gates. There are gates that look like this. At any time during the Place Atlantis phase or during the Take Actions phase, you can also spend your Mystic Energy for them to be able to place these gates at the end of the peninsula, meaning that if one of those cards come up, you can destroy that gate to prevent that from happening. Once that's done, everyone then gets to take their actions, just like the Place Atlantis phase. Everyone can do this simultaneously in any order that you so wish, and you're simply going to pull those guys off, roll dice in some cases, trying to hit numbers to gain resources, converting those over to other resources, drawing cards, picking them, and then rolling for these, or contributing resources to complete any of the different gates in the game. And all that is done simultaneously at the same time.
Yeah, it is simultaneous, but it doesn't have to be complete chaos. Of course, like we said, we can't stress enough, this is a co-op game, so you should be talking to each other. If Jeremy's picking up a bunch of diamonds and he and I both have a person on the core and we're wanting to build stuff, I can say, okay, if you're going to get the 2 diamonds, I won't try that. I won't use my Mystic Energy to try to get that. If you've got them, I'll get this. And then you're really, truly cooperating, especially when it comes to building those gate pieces.
In the spirit of cooperation, too, anytime you build these Mystic Gates, multiple people can contribute to that to build it. So you can give up 2 energy from one player and 2 Mystic Energy from another player. In fact, people can even give up 4 Mystic Energy to flip a tile back. That's one of the other uses for them. Once that is done, then we're going to do the Enduring the Wrath of the Gods phase. Now, we don't have that board in front of us because, as we said, this is a prototype version. But during the Wrathful Gods phase, we're actually going to have to turn over even more of these tiles.
Yeah, the Wrathful God phase, this is going to be a board that goes from 0 to 1, 1, 2, 2, and then 3. These numbers have a couple different meanings. During the Wrathful God phase, you're going to look at that number wherever it's positioned, and you're going to have to decide as a group to flip over 1 tile somewhere on the board if it's on the 1.
Yeah.
If it's on the 2, 2 tiles, so on and so forth. So this is a built-in mechanism where you are absolutely going to basically be doing the same thing as the controlled flooding misfortune. But this happens at the end of every round for sure.
And you're going to keep doing this round after round until one of 2 things happen. One is you've built all the gate pieces, and then you have to actually build the core itself, which has its own list of resources on the top of it. If that happens, you successfully win the game. However, if all the peninsulas are flooded and the center part floods, you've lost, and Atlantis is sunk.
Yeah, so just like the legend or the history books show, depending on your perspective, Atlantis is likely to sink in this game. We've played this on normal, and the rulebook we have has 5 different difficulty settings.
Yeah.
I shudder to think what the most difficult setting would be.
Yeah.
Be like to play. But it's got a range, so you could start it easy and really get your feet wet, no pun intended. But normal is what we played it on the most, and it is a very, very challenging game at that.
Let's talk about the changes, because the people who have played this game before want to know, what am I getting new in this edition of the game? The first thing is that they've created leaders. Each of us is going to have our own leader, and as we said, these leader powers have been changed from the previous version. So they're all going to tie in mostly to where your leader is located, giving you some kind of special power, preventing certain tiles from flipping, or allowing you, as you said, to go to these before they're built. They all are varied and very different from one another.
Yeah, those are very interesting powers. One other big difference, and probably the biggest difference that they shared with us, is the old game had the fleet, or the navy.
Yeah.
This has been replaced with that Wrathful Gods board. So the navy interacted with the city's peninsula for the most part as it related to getting your people and how that peninsula would potentially be destroyed. They got rid of the navy, they heard that feedback over the years, and they've replaced it with the Wrathful Gods board.
3 other changes to the game. One is that the artifacts, these are new to the game. These are the ones that are played face up in front of you. They do count towards your hand limit of 4 of these library cards at a time, but they're going to give you ongoing boons throughout the course of the game. The second thing that I wanted to mention was the actual Atlanteans that can be placed on the gates themselves. These are new. Once the core, or once these gates are built up and placed around the core, these are actually worker placement locations as well, which wasn't in the original game.
Yeah, that's a really cool element because it gives you some guidance as to which ones you might want to build. You can take a look at all those gate pieces and go, oh, this one would really help us out given the way our game is going. Let's build this next, which in the original game, there wasn't as much of a decision there.
And for all you solo players out there, now there is a dedicated solo mode as well, so if you're interested in that. So that is Atlantis Rising. naturally a 2 to 6 player, but also has a solo mode built in. If you have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Please go check out their Kickstarter because it will have final art, final components located there that you can check out. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, everything else that we do, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.